Toronto and Square One Shopping Centre, which I hadn't realized before. They probably own some shopping centres out here too. But yeah, and Norway has done a very good job as well in setting out how they're going to use their fund. And they have very strict criteria. And the other thing they're very good at is transparency. I mean, if you want to see how that fund is used, what the rules are, you can just go on a website. Anybody can go on the website and take a look and see where those investments are. So, yeah, I'm stressing the idea of it. Let's create a fund, but of course it's important what you do with that fund as well.
Can everyone hear me?
Oh,
I haven't made up my mind completely on the sovereign. I haven't made up my mind completely on the sovereign wealth fund, but just drill down deeper on what you were saying. I don't think it's innovation. I think that you should really look at natural resources on a much broader model or paradigm than what you're doing.
Can you talk louder because that mic is cutting in and out?
Yeah.
Can't hear a thing.
Okay. I think you should look at natural resources on a much broader basis than what you're doing, and to drill down deeper on what you were talking about on innovation. It really isn't about innovation. It's about knowledge and education and skills. That's all it's about. And to use the natural resources that any country can to increase the education level of its citizens is the best way that you're going to pass on wealth, pass on the ability of people to generate wealth. I mean, I've been in the mining business in Canada for 30 years now. You know, in Canada, really, at a certain level, you're dealing with people who have 2 or 3 degrees, whether it's in technical, whether it's in finance, across the board. So I think that countries, the best way they can protect themselves now and going forward and for generating wealth is simply to use the money wisely. And that's, really the question. That's up to the governments. It's not up to the private sector. The private sector is there to generate money. The government will redistribute it. But it should be very particular in using that to increase the skill level of its citizens. That's the only way you're going to ultimately protect and allow future generations to compete.
I don't disagree with you. I think that's a good point. I was fairly restricted in this report in terms of they really did want me to look at natural resources. And so I couldn't expand that beyond energy and mining and forestry. We could have dealt with human capital as well and agriculture and water, but there was only a limited amount of time. But I think you make a good point on the education. And in fact, in the section that deals with temporary foreign workers and not relying on them so much, that's where we get into the education and using more of the labor force that's out there, which again links into education with Aboriginal Canadians and with more women.
Well, what I'm talking about is for policies to be very specific about designed around producing centers of excellence in the resource industry that can then take that and go worldwide. There are no borders. So if you have a Canadian oil company in Calgary, or you have a Canadian mining company in Toronto or Vancouver, they don't see what natural resources in the context of Canada. They're based in. What they're providing is the knowledge and innovation and the capital to produce wealth. So it's the Canadians, it's all of these people's kids or grandkids who can become skilled at something with a focus on natural resources to take that. We're not, we're maybe not going to do it in terms of building have a wonderful opportunity to use the natural resources we have to become innovators and take that knowledge all over the world.
Okay, okay,
That's-
thank you. Let me just ask, before we move on to another point, how are we doing for time?
It's 20 past, another 15 minutes or so. Are you okay with that?
Okay, yeah, yep, no, that's fine. One more point and then I'll just move on to a different topic.
Sorry, I just wanted to add, I agree with you. My point though on innovation isn't directly related to the actual resource. I mean innovation right across the board. Innovation in education. Obviously, you know, we're not getting it right in terms of we're having shortages. There's a lot of new technology, social media. And it's amazing what my kids do with social media. And when I talk about innovation, I mean right across the board. It has to start in education. It has to be in our healthcare system. But there has to be an emphasis so that we get to, I think, the result you're looking for, that people have tools, that they have vocations, they have opportunity, and use that opportunity for the betterment and sustainability of these resources.
We're actually, I guess I took up longer than I thought on that particular point, so I'll just do very briefly a second one because it usually generates quite a good conversation, which is habit number 4, which is keep up with the world, put a price on carbon. In the report, and here, I'm not going to argue the environmental question of this. In my mind, it's already been resolved. But regardless, I think that you can also make a good business case for why it's a good idea to have, to put a price on carbon. And in the report, I suggested it be a carbon tax, but what's more important is just that you do put a price on carbon. At the very beginning, when I started to do the research, I was asked, and I can't remember who asked me this now, but they wanted me to answer the question of why is it that Finland, that has a very small forested area compared to Canada, and yet when you go around the world and see who's selling the forest equipment, it's Finnish equipment, it's not Canadian forestry equipment. They are the global leaders in that particular area. So the question was, well, what's Finland got that we don't have? Why is this happening? And I thought when I was looking into it, or before I looked into it, I'd find, I don't know, some technology or educational reasons or something like that. So I did track down one of the leading manufacturers of forest equipment in Finland and put the question to them. The company's called Ponsse, I'm probably mispronouncing it, P-O-N-S-S-E. And his explanation was really interesting because a large part of it came down to Finland has stricter environmental regulations and they have a price on carbon. Right? So how does that come into it? He was saying that when they're designing equipment, they have to make sure that it's super fuel efficient and also that it's lighter. That goes into the fuel efficiency as well, and that it does as much as possible. And he came to Canada and visited a forest operation and said he was amazed to see that what the Finns would do with his one machine, now take this with a grain of salt, this is the manufacturer telling me this, but what the Finns would do with one machine, the Canadians were using 3 different machines and they were all gas guzzlers to do. Okay. So how does this link into it? You think that you're another country, in another country, you're looking for forestry equipment. What are you going to buy? Are you going to buy the 3 gas guzzling machines that have been designed, that work perfectly well in the Canadian environment? They're designed for the regulations and rules that we have here, and in the US for that matter. Or are you going to buy this Finnish piece of equipment that's also going to save you money because it doesn't use as much energy? So the broader question is, when you have those tighter environmental regulations and you're penalizing people that are using carbon, it leads to people designing products, processes, technology, services that are designed for that environment and that will appeal on a global basis to countries that aren't net energy exporters like we are here. It's funny when you travel, and I know that there are so many of you in this room that have traveled abroad. When you step outside of Canada or North America, you realize we're in a bit of a bubble here in our conversation about, mostly about the carbon emissions. And you don't even have to go to Europe. I mean, let's go to the other extreme, Australia, that has just put a price on carbon. They're a very good comparison.